This is Damon Brown. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV. I appreciate y'all coming through. I'm an entrepreneurial coach helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. If you're trying to do something different, if you're not going to take the traditional entrepreneur path, you are in the right place. And hopefully I'm the right person to talk to you about it. This is Bring Your Worth TV. I come to you live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe to this for free. Shout out to y'all that are watching on LinkedIn. Shout out to y'all that are watching or will be watching on the new platform. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And shout out to y'all that are watching on the original platform over at YouTube at bringyourworth.tv. You can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection, my 27th book, 27 of these suckers. The complete Bring Your Worth collection contains 7 of my most liked and some best-selling books in here, including The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, which y'all made a bestseller. So thank you infinitely, as well as Bring Your Worth, the name of the show and my publishing company, as well as my personal favorite, Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. You can go and check out all of them here. They are available right here. Go ahead and check it out. You can go ahead and listen to it right now too. I have audiobook available. I want to give something to my folks that are abroad, that are that I'm coaching that might not have access to audiobooks, Audible, or whatever your platform might not be available there. Spotify or whatever might not be available there. Be sure and check it out here. You can listen to it for free on the channel at bringyourworth.tv. And speaking of that, new information, new exclusive. Thinking about the mixtapes back on the East Coast when I was growing up, waiting for the bomb effects to come in. New exclusive. Listen to Bring Your Worth TV on Spotify now. Spotify has a new program where they're actually doing more videos. Spotify is obviously known as an audio platform, but now they're doing more videos, and it sounded like a really good opportunity. So I jumped right the heck in. So some of these live episodes, and in fact, I think the whole live catalog might end up on there is available on Spotify right now. So if you rock with Spotify, go to Spotify right now. If you go and click on the link right there, then it'll send you straight to my Spotify page. What's really cool about Spotify too is that you might not have known this. I've mentioned it a few times, but my books, audiobooks, are actually available on Spotify as well. So the latest, again, the complete Bring Your Worth collection, that's available on Spotify, as well as Career Remix and some of my books over the past, I'd say 8 or 9 years since I've been doing business books. So be sure and check it out. Go ahead and subscribe to the show. Check it out. Support it over there if you're a Spotify listener. The video is also available, but I know a lot of y'all, including some of my friends, you are really mess with Spotify. You can check out the stuff over there. Right now, it's just going to be focused on the live episodes. So you'll see some of the best live episodes from earlier this year. And check it out and give it for a spin. In case you missed it, last week I talked about my favorite emotional intelligence questions. I really love the format. If you go in and check out the video, which was similar to the format that we're doing today, so live show, it lasted about an hour or so. You also see some commentary in the comments. And this episode today is actually a response to one of the comments that's in there. So shout out to you. You know who you are. Thank you for watching and for giving the feedback as far as some of those emotional intelligence blocks and challenges that you're currently having. All right, today's show, let go of perfection. This is a big one. When it comes to perfectionism, I know and care about a lot of people who are perfectionists, and often it's a fear of not being good enough, and that's really where it comes from. It comes from a place of I don't know if I belong here. Now, some people have categorized that nowadays as imposter syndrome, as in you start to get success, but you believe that you're faking it and that you're going to get found out. Some people have put that as feeling guilt or shame, which we'll get into a little bit in this episode, as well as some of the people and the leading psychologists and other folks who specialize in this idea. But the result is often that we feel like we're below our actual potential. So today we're going to talk about 4 questions you can ask to address your own perfectionism, why being perfect is overrated, it really is, and also how we can move forward and be in a better place, particularly as a creator, to do that. So let's dig into the program. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, even if you disagree with some of the stuff that I'm saying, jump into the comments. Let me know what's happening over there. And today's episode is sponsored by Shortform, the ultimate book reader companion. You can get a free trial or 20% off now at shortform.com/Damon, Damon. Let me throw it on stage here. There we go. I love it. Technology works. This is short form. This is actually my short form account. I use short form for two different things. The first thing I use short form for is that I have it's a very small piece of my catalog. I recently moved offices. My I have like five, six times as many books as I have behind my big head over there. You can see it up behind my shoulder. Sometimes there's massive books that I have, literally physically massive. Again, like the 48 Laws of Power, which you see right here, huge books. And there's one particular passage or one particular idea that I want from them. I'm doing one of my live shows, what have you, and I need it right away. What are you going to do? This gives you an opportunity to get that information very quickly. So, one, as far as the archivist, even if it's books that you already have, then you're able to go through and get the information quickly. Secondly, if there's books that you're actually interested in, then not only can you go deeper into the essence of that book, but you can actually see the things related to it. So, for instance, the 48 Laws of Power here, that's done by my guy, Robert Greene. So, we'll do Robert Greene. And then you have his beautiful books there. But then you also have the podcasts that he's been on, specific podcast episodes. See, there he is right there, as well as major articles from HBR, Harvard Business Review, or other platforms like that. For someone who researches books, again, the Complete Bringworth Collection is my 27th book, so I'm one of those book nerds. So I'm constantly researching and looking into things. If you're working on articles, a lot of the people, a lot of y'all that I coach are journalists. So if you're researching this thing, if you're grant writers, respect out to y'all. If you're doing anything that requires research, it will find the core of that book, have it available for you quickly, and then have all the information that's connected to that book or that author. So now you don't have to scrub through all the podcasts and find out, well, what else did Robert Greene say? Or when was he talking about the 40 Laws of Power? They're literally right here and it connects directly to them. I have a limited time offer that I was able to get for Bring Your Worth TV listeners and watchers like yourself. It's available. I think it's a free trial. I want to say for 30 days, something like that, 30 to 60 days. I believe it's a month, might be more. And then it's going to be 20% off if you decide to get involved. Please go and check it out. Not only would you be supporting the channel, but also you'd be able to get a lot more of your work done more efficiently. So thanks again to Shortform for sponsoring the show. All right, so let's talk about it. Letting go of perfection. It really begins with understanding yourself and understanding why you feel a certain way about when you create and when you feel that pause to say, you know what, I'm I'm not good enough for this, or what I did isn't good enough, and I'm going to stay in this position. I found that in the people that I've coached and people that I even care about that deal with perfectionism, it often creates a pause, but it's a pause that really shouldn't be there. It's like you're about to ship something, and you're like, it's not quite good enough. You're about to apply for that position or that role. You're about to do that startup. I'm not quite ready. So many of us, and I have my master's, so I'm not judging anybody that does the higher education. But part of perfectionism is feeling like you always have to keep getting more and more validity and more acceptance and more credentials. So folks that have like three PhDs and all those things, but they haven't actually been in the workforce or they haven't actually created anything. They've just been studying it. At a certain point, to be frank, all of us run out of time. That could be part of perfectionism as well. So we're going to get into 4 questions you can ask yourself to work on your perfectionism, as well as give a smattering of books, of course. Shout out to short form, a smattering of books, many of them that are available in short form, as well as some previous Bring Your Worth episodes that would apply to it. Before, I totally forgot. I can tell I'm on some other stuff right now. Today is the 400th episode. So it's been 400 episodes, almost 4 years of hanging out with me hanging out with you, 18,000 plus subscribers and all that. Thank you so much for the love and support. Back in 2020, December of 2020, it was the equinox. And I guess that's not the equinox. I guess it's the winter solstice. So it was like December 19th, 20th, or something like that. When I started, thank you so much for the love. And I so appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. So 400 episodes. And the tough thing is that if you're kind of stuck in the loop of perfectionism, you're not going to make it as far as getting that far. It's like you're so focused on making sure that things are perfect or correct. And if you go through the 400 episodes, plenty of content. I'm sure it's like 2 months worth of episodes now. If you just played it straight on YouTube or what have you, they are far from perfect. And I won't even bring up some of those things. Speaking of shame and guilt, ways that I've screwed up this channel. But yet we survived, and you guys hung in there with me. And so many of us expect other people to think that we're perfect, when in reality, they just want to see us thrive and to do the very best that we can. So the first question, one other thing too. Sorry, see, I'm all over the place today. I talked about perfectionism in today's newsletter. I have a newsletter at joindamon.me. Why perfect is overrated. I really enjoyed writing this for you guys. It's a really short essay talking about that. It's part of my weekly newsletter available at joindamon.me, or you can just click the link below. And that would also help support the channel. You'll find out what's going on with me, special coaching tools, and other things that are exclusively available there. But it goes deeper into the conversation. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, and let me go ahead and take this down to make sure there's enough room, because this is a long question, so I want to make sure that you guys can see the whole thing. Suddenly I got to ask it. When you feel like you aren't doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? When you feel like you're not doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? We can take a step back here, and for a lot of us, we get guilt and shame mixed up. We think they're the same. They're actually not. And this definition comes from Dr. Brene Brown as well as some other people, but Brene Brown is the main definition that I use. Guilt is when you feel like you should be doing something, either something better or more likely you should be doing, taking some type of action, but you're not. So it's an internal judgment to say, yeah, I should have hit the gym this morning, but I didn't. I feel guilty about that. That's a simple example. It's usually internal. Shame actually is the opposite of that. Shame is when you feel like you should have done something or perhaps done something better, and you're afraid other people are going to judge you. It's an external instrument. As you might imagine, with guilt and with shame, guilt can eat you up quite a bit, but shame is really, really corrosive. And it's corrosive in the sense of you're actually giving away your power. And there's always going to be, what is it, 8 billion people in the world, if not already, right? If not soon. So 7.5, 8 billion people in the world. I don't care if you're the biggest superstar on the planet, have all the money on the planet. You imagine some of the people I'm thinking about, those insecurities as far as what other people think will continue to haunt you. You can have the most beautiful person that you're married to or going out with or whatever. You can have beautiful kids, beautiful house, you know, straight up, what is it, talking heads. This is not my beautiful wife. This is not my beautiful house. You can go through that spiral, be through the opposite of that. And if you are conducting from a place of shame, then whatever you do is never going to be good enough, because there's always going to be someone who might have an opinion. And sometimes they're actually going to have a point where you could have done better if you had different resources or had a different perspective. And sometimes that's true. But when we're run by shame, we allow that to eat us up inside. And that's what makes it so difficult to work with that, you know? There you go. My shift came from my mentor. You're okay is everyone else is fantastic. You're okay, as in you're pretty good, is everyone else is fantastic. And that would shift you. I remember us talking about, thank you for the feedback. You're pretty good, just okay, is everyone else is fantastic. So often the measuring stick that we have, particularly if we're dealing with perfectionism, and I don't consider myself a perfectionist, but I definitely have been in that arena where I've suddenly caught myself where it's redoing something for the umpteenth time, not I'm uploading a video for y'all, not wanting to go on live because my hair isn't perfect, like whatever, whatever. We've all dealt with those types of things. If you're not dealing with those types of things, you might not be pushing yourself enough. But if you are feeling those things, you might be going into new territory, which is where the insecurity might come from. But it's important to know if you're feeling bad because you have a higher standard for yourself, guilt, or if you're feeling bad or perfectionist about it because you're afraid that other people are going to judge you. Again, the most corruptive perfectionism, and the one that I've seen in my coaching clients and even folks that I've interacted with, the most difficult one is when it's built around shame, because you really have to tame the beast, because there's literally always going to be other people's opinions. I probably deal with guilt more than shame, so that's a little bit easier. Where it's like, oh, okay, well, Damien, you can adjust your standard, and then that kind of calms you down. Meditation, other things I talked about in recent previous episodes, episodes on transition, other things. A lot of the links are below. You just subscribe right now and see the recent episodes right before this 400th one. That actually helps you get grounded. If you're dealing with shame, though, that means that you have to kind of call back those voices and find out where they're coming from. And sometimes those voices are coming from, you know, the way we were raised. They're coming from an intense criticism that cut us deep when we were in elementary school. I still remember some of those criticisms when my kids are 8 and 11. I still remember some of those criticisms that some of the less nice teachers said to me. And that was decades ago, as you can tell by my gray hair. So sometimes those voices actually aren't our own. We just internalize them. And often that ends up representing where shame comes from. A good example to go deeper into this is Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, be respectful here. Her first book, The Gifts of Imperfection. This is a lesser known one because her next book, I want to say, was Rising Strong. Was it Daring Greatly? I think Daring Greatly was her second book. And that's when, she took off. That's around the time I went to my first TED and saw her speak in person, blew my mind. Da, da, da. So this is before everything took off. A classic, old school one. It's right in the title, The Gifts of Imperfection. Why being perfect and having things perfect is overrated. It's so important to have this part of the conversation, particularly as I've talked about, I'm a parent. And so I'm having those conversations with my boys darn near every day, definitely weekly, as far as they get out into the quote unquote real world, as that feedback starts to come in, separating their internal standard and their personal best from what other people might do or say. And sometimes that shame isn't imaginary. Sometimes people are actually being critical of you. I dealt with that a lot recently, and I had to do my own check-in of myself and be like, this person's opinion or this organization's opinion does not define me. This book is into that and more. Definitely check it out. I think all of Dr. Brown's books are classic. My personal favorite is Rising Strong, but you know this one is also a classic as well. And of course, talking about Dr. Brown, not me, but her. I'm not a doctor yet. What's the difference between shame and guilt? It gets a lot deeper into what I just broke down for y'all. Definitely worth checking out. And I think that might give some insight as far as that's concerned. If you're dealing with perfectionism, or if you consider that you're a perfectionist, do you feel like you're dealing more with guilt, which is feeling like you should do more in an internal way, or more dealing with shame, where you're afraid that you're going to be found out, that you're not doing as much as you think you should be? Let me know in the comments. Even if you're watching the replay, go and throw something in there. I think it's really important to kind of figure out where that's coming from. I think that's key to dealing with perfectionism. So the first question, when you feel like you aren't doing enough, are you feeling guilt or shame? I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. And you can grab the new book, the complete Bring Your Worth collection, available wherever fine books are sold. And you can also listen to the audiobook on your favorite platform, including Spotify, and listen to it right here for free. And you can catch some of the recent episodes on Spotify and check it out. Yeah. And recovering perfectionist probably guilt. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really, I appreciate that. And I think it's important to kind of separate what those two feelings are, because then you can address them in a deeper way, as we'll talk about in other questions. Thank you so much for your comment. All right, so today we're talking about how to let go of perfectionism. Live Q&A. Again, jump in the comments. Let us know how you're feeling about that and how you're dealing with your own perfectionism. So next question is, when was the last time you were proud of something you created? When was the last time you were proud of something that you created? As creators, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, even as far as, again, back to parenting and other things, there's so much emotional labor. If we care, there's so much emotional labor that we put into the work that we're doing and leadership that we're doing. How often do we say, hey, Damon, talking to myself, I did a really good job. I showed up as best as possible. How often does that happen? I found that when we kind of get lost in the throes of perfectionism, psychiatrists often talk about voices, not as far as psychiatric, but voices as far as the voice in our head. And there's always a dialogue in our head if you think about it. That's why meditation and other things are so important. Walking long distances, taking long showers, taking a bath, whatever it is that gets you into that zone, taking a nap, because then we're able to separate the voice in our head from our true feelings. It becomes the voices in our head that are saying, yeah, Damon, you screwed up. They tend to be a lot louder than the ones that said, hey, Damon, you showed up really well. Good job. Often it could be lopsided to one particular thing. So when we talk about when's the last time you were proud of something you created, it requires not only pausing and giving yourself flowers, as they say nowadays, um, to a recent action or even a past action that you did, but it also requires hearing that voice that says you did a good job. And that has to be turned up more than the one that says you screwed up. Because personally, the one that says I screwed up, and I have a solid ego too, but that can yell pretty loud. I'm like, why are you so loud? Yes, I know. I know I screwed up this video. Yes. I know I could have said something nicer in that instance. Yes. I know that I sent that out and it had 3 different errors in it. Yes, I'm aware of that. Yes, yes, yes. As someone said recently, and I wish I can remember who said it over the last few years. It's like, have you tried? I think it might have been Pema Chodron, the monk who I talk about quite a bit on this channel. I think it was something to the effect of, you tried beating yourself up to become a better person. It seems like that didn't work out. How about you try the other way? Actually give yourself love. It's the same exact argument. We beat ourselves up. We do the self-flagellation, all this stuff, because we think that's going to take us to the next level. Sometimes we do need to be hard on ourselves and show up. Again, this is the 400th episode. I can't thank you guys more, but I had to be hard on myself to show up 400 times. This through a pandemic and little kids and all kinds of personal stuff going on. So sometimes you have to be tough on yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to beat yourself up. Those are 2 separate things. Discipline is different than criticizing yourself. Discipline is saying, I'm going to show up for you guys at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time, live on Wednesdays as much as physically possible. I'm going to do bonus episodes on Sunday. I'm going to do shorts. All the things that are available at bringyourworth.tv. Again, you can subscribe below. But the proof is in the pudding. I've showed up for y'all consistently. That's discipline. When I miss an episode or it doesn't work out as well as I thought, then that's when I need to be really careful. That's when it's like, okay, we can go into criticism territory. Me beating myself up because I missed an episode or it didn't go as well or my mic was messed up and I didn't realize it or I realized it was spinach in my teeth, whatever the vibe is, that's not going to help get us there. What will help us get us there, though, is saying, I had pride. I was happy. I was thankful that I was able to show up in this particular way. I did it. As I talk about in my newsletter, the link is below, and I mentioned it earlier in the show. You can read it at joindamon.me. There's been so many major transitions I've been through, and Frankly, so many people I love have been through a ton of transitions too. It just seems to be that year of transitions. As I talk about the newsletter, the amount of seasons that are changing, it seems like we're between seasons, and it's everything feels like it's in transition. Many of us would not make those three, four, in my case, five different transitions simultaneously that I went through this year would not be possible if I didn't have gratitude and recognize how well I showed up. Even if it wasn't as well as I wanted it to be, it was my personal best. That comes down to creating, that comes down to leadership, that comes down to any endeavor that requires some level of discipline. That's what I'm getting at. If you're going to have that discipline, you need to be gentle with yourself and actually congratulate yourself when you are able to show that discipline. And it might not be to the level that you want, but it might be the best that you can do at this moment. If you want to go deeper into this idea, one of my favorite books by one of my favorite people, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Hope you're doing wonderful, Stephen. Hope you're doing well. Fantastic book. You can see the dog ears and it's turning brown. It's gonna be my complexion in a second. This book is old. I've had it for at least a dozen years. One of my favorite books of all time. Break through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. Stephen talks about quite a bit in here, but it's extremely simple. Again, it's really big type, so it's not a really long book. I want to say it's 120 pages. What am I talking about? It's not even that. You can read it in the afternoon. I like to savor it. I probably read it about once a year or so. He has this argument saying that there's something called the resistance. The resistance is basically saying that voice, going back to voices, that voice in your head that's saying, yeah, you're not good enough. You need a little bit more accreditation. You need a little bit more work, and you're not ready for the public. You're nowhere near the level of these other people who are really the masters at the game. And as you can imagine, his argument is saying, no, actually, you have to fight through that resistance because the resistance is lying. Masters become masters because they do the work. They put their behind in the seat. That's it. And I'm middle aged. His book writing career didn't really start until he was a little bit younger than me. And he's pretty well known now if you're familiar with art and creating and you know the work um, of Elizabeth Gilbert with Big Magic and some of the older The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Like this is in that fashion. And he's one of the leaders in that discussion now for sure. And I've talked with the guy, like he's on that level. What's brilliant about it though is that to be able to find and clarify how you're going to impact the world and how you're going to serve the world at not a young age, that's a different vibe. I think he might have wrote this when he was like 40. The amount of wisdom in here is incredible. And here's to having a life well lived. So shout out to you, Mr. Pressfield. As you know, I love your work. Fantastic book you should have on your shelf. Out of all the books that I recommend here, this one is probably the best one if you're feeling stuck in the energy about it. And exactly, it's in the practice. It's in the practice of doing the work. That's how you become better. And you may never master what it is. I don't plan on mastering, you know, 400 episodes in. I don't plan on mastering hanging out with y'all. Or I'm a keynote speaker. I've done a few TED talks. I'm nowhere near a master at doing those. But that's not the point. How many things do you want to venture at, and then you get it perfect when you do it the first time? What's after perfection? Sounds pretty boring to me. If you want to watch a video that talks about this even more, it's about consistency, the practice, as the comment says. Watch this now, live Q&A. This was probably at the top of the summer, I want to believe. And it's about how to be consistent. And yeah, there's a lot of good tips in there. I'm really proud of this particular episode because something that I talk to a lot of my coaching clients as well as a lot of y'all that watch the show about how to show up consistently. Again, we're episode 400 today. So please listen to some of that advice. And a lot of that advice actually doesn't come from me, but from the Stephen Pressfields and the Elizabeth Gilberts and the people that I honor as far as being wonderful mentors, whether I know them personally, like Stephen, or don't know them personally. I appreciate all of y'all on the journey. So when was the last time you were proud of something you created? Let us know in the comments. Jump in. It might have been a while ago, or it might have been something earlier today. Even if you don't comment right now, just go through that process because that question will help you realize how loud those critical voices are versus those ones that really just want you to be better, to show up consistently. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. This is Bring Your Worth TV. Wednesdays, 1:11. What time is it? 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can catch it on mess load of platforms right now. But if you want to subscribe to the main base here, you can subscribe right below at youtube.com/Brown Damon or just at bringyourworth.tv. And of course, the complete Bring Your Worth collection is available now. You can also listen to some select live shows on Spotify. You can expect more of that over there. And that's become a really fun platform so far to work with. So today we're talking about, excuse me, how to let go of perfectionism. And when is the last time you were proud of something you created? What past failure are you still replaying in your head? What past failure are you still replaying in your head? This is a heavy one. As I mentioned, I've gone through a lot of transitions, particularly this year. And if you're going through transitions, you're not going to be perfect at all. Uh, the transition just essentially is another word for chaos because you don't have your grounding yet. A lot of our perfectionist tendencies tend to come up or get amplified when we're going through a new area that we're actually quiet as kept. We're actually not supposed to know. We're not supposed to go through a transition perfectly. We're not supposed to have this tough conversation perfectly. We're not supposed to get into this new role perfectly. We're not supposed to do that. Now, if that's our criteria, then yes, we're going to be sorely disappointed. So when we're talking about perfectionism, we're really talking about idealism. In an ideal world, in this vacuum, I would operate in this way. If I already knew that was going to happen, I would operate this way. Well, of course you would have, as any sane person would, but you didn't know. You didn't have all the answers. Listen, if you had all the answers, it wouldn't be a transition because it wouldn't be anything new. Therefore, it's literally logically impossible for you to have all the answers. Because if you're doing the same old stuff, then it's not a transition. It's not anything new about it. So when we dwell on what past failure are you still replaying in your mind, when we're dwelling on those past failures, it's often our inability to recognize our own idealism, to realize I'm beating myself up over a situation that I had very little control over. I'm self-flagellating, which is hitting yourself with a whip or whatever. Like I'm hurting myself, proverbially, not literally. If you're literally doing that, please get a therapist. But if you're doing that psychologically to yourself, if you're hurting yourself, if it's often based on these high expectations, these, I would argue, unrealistic expectations that you're going to show up a certain way that was near to impossible to show up as. I have stuff from my childhood where I'm like, oh, I could have handled that better. I'm like, I was 4. Like, doesn't make any sense. I did, and likely you did, whatever seemed reasonable based on the resources and the knowledge you had at the time. You did whatever seemed reasonable based on the resources and knowledge you had at the time. Perfectionism and try and make things perfect plays a game with us. It's some ethereal, liminal, abstract idea that we're supposed to live up to. But that's not why we're here. That's why we get into the guilt versus shame. Guilt is saying I should have showed up a certain way. Why didn't I show up that way? Shame is saying I didn't show up that way, and everybody knows it. Now I can't show my face. In either case, then that's when the compensation starts. And we start trying to overcompensate for so-called past failures. I remember interacting with someone. I'll keep the names out of it. I remember interacting with someone and them saying, "Well, I don't feel guilt or shame because I'm over that, and it's a shame that other people do." And myself and other people that I interact with this person all kind of looked at each other and like, "Oh, you just revealed." I used to play poker. We're just from Atlantic City. You just revealed your cards, right? It's like playing Uno with all the cards upside down or right side up. It's like, oh, you really feel a level of guilt or shame to the level where you can't even admit that you feel those things. That's some deep work. Not from a place of judgment. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if we feel this guilt or this shame, or both, you can feel both around a past failure or sometime we weren't able to live up to those expectations we had in our head or that we felt like other people had for us, then overcompensation starts. I did a recent episode around summertime. It's all in the links about accepting your shadow and understanding your shadow side. It gets into that. Dr. Brown's work, Dr. Brene Brown's work gets into that. Whatever we don't reveal, we can't really heal. And we don't have to reveal it to other people, but we do need to work on our stuff. And if we don't work on our stuff, I guess you could say our stuff will work on us. And I remember having this moment with this person and with other people that were there. And it was a clear moment. We all kind of looked at each other. It's like, and whatever they weren't dealing with was crystal clear to us. But they were in such a sense of denial and probably over shame over whatever they experienced. That stuff was unprocessed. And who knows how else that might have been coming out in this person's life. When you know better, you do better. Be gentle with yourself. Exactly. From the great, another doctor, Dr. Maya Angelou. Thank you for the comment. I haven't heard that one in a long time. So, what past failure are you still replaying in your mind? When you're about to launch that product or that service, when you're about to get on that stage and say something, if you're a speaker like myself, when you're about to seal that deal with that new customer, when you're about to address a community that you've been waiting to serve for so long, when you're about to apply for that grant or that scholarship or that funding, you're talking to VCs or what have you. And that little thing says, no, you're not. That's not you. What's replaying in your head? Often there's some type of pain, some type of wound that's there that needs to be addressed. And hopefully that example I gave, which I hope they're doing better, but it sounds like that, with the person that I was talking with, they had a lot of work to do. And hopefully they got to it. We all have work to do. Sometimes it's just more obvious to other people. If we want to go deeper into this, we cannot have this episode without my guy, Dan Nan Han. Let me move my fat finger so you can see it. There we go. No mud, no lotus. Rest in peace. He passed away about 2 years ago. Fantastic monk, um, Buddhist monk. I forget where he's based. I want to say in Nepal, but he moved around quite a bit. Actually, Martin Luther King Jr., that one, well before I was born, came to this guy, Thich Nhat Hanh, to get insight into nonviolent revolution. Mm. He was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mentor. This guy was on some deep stuff. I think when he passed away, he was probably approaching 100. He had been around for a while. Fantastic book. The basic premise and the idea of this is that the lotus flower, which if you're familiar with yoga practices or if you've seen someone meditate, I think I had a recent episode on solitude and I was in the lotus position. It's basically when you have like, your legs crossed, crisscross applesauce, as they say at my kids' school, and then your hands out, in a particular position. That's called the lotus position because you're opening yourself up to whatever wisdom might come from the insights from the universe. We won't get too deep into it, but that's the lotus position. That's based on the lotus flower. The lotus flower, which I think is really common in like Thailand and kind of the Southeast Asia, including like Nepal, that actually comes from mud. No mud, no lotus. One of the most beautiful flowers in the world. It's usually like pink and it might be a little lavender. It's like beautiful. These pastel colors. It comes from the mud. Comes from the mud. They got it from the mud, as modern hip hoppers say today. Got it straight from the mud. Those toughest challenges that we have, they often end up creating the most beautiful results if we're resilient enough and if we're disciplined enough to get through those pains and those challenges. And as we talk about in this episode, to get over our perfectionism and to realize that the mud is part of the process. Who deals with mud and doesn't get dirty? Who raises a person from when they come out of the womb or later, for those folks that adopt or have step families, raises them until the parent is no longer there, when the parent's time to check out, and doesn't make mistakes or doesn't learn things. Who founds a company? I've founded two of them. Who's founded a company and not made mistakes, not lost sleep over a misjudgment or miscalculation, not sunk a company or nearly sunk a company because they were off base, end up losing a customer because they said the wrong thing or they addressed something differently. Then next time, you show up better. When you know better, you do better. Again, thanks for the quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. I was a big fan of his before he passed. And then when he passed, I did a special episode 190. So like 200 episodes ago. Best Thich Nhat Hanh quote you need to hear right now. We're going through turbulent times. When I did this video, guess what? 210 episodes later, still going through turbulent times. As I say in many of my books and sometimes on this show, this is something that we need right now in these turbulent times. And it's always turbulent times. There's always something new going on. That's what makes the world go round. One of my favorite songs right now, which I grew up with, but I'm really getting into now, is the Stylistics, People Make the World Go Round, which if you didn't hear the original one back in the early 70s, you would have heard the many remakes from Angela Bofield, rest in peace to her, as well as I think it's a guy named Mark Dorsey, who actually did it for the Crooklyn soundtrack back in the 90s. I'm getting a music nerd on you guys. But it's a fantastic song where it's like, this is kind of how it works. There's ups, there's downs, there's challenges. What are we going to do with this mud? When you're beating yourself up over a past failure. And it's okay to call it a failure if you feel that way. Okay, you had a past failure. Does that prevent you from moving forward? Does that close off all the doors? Was there nothing learned from that failure? And if all those things are not true, or you have new opportunities, you learn something from it, was it really a failure? Something to think about. You guys don't have to jump in the comments with whatever past failure you're feeling unless you feel like doing it, because I know it's a lot, and some of us have very heavy ones. I know I certainly have some. First attempt at learning, exactly. Learning how to embrace both aspects as necessary in order to create the magic. Exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking about so many songs, back to the song thing, that talk about how you have to accept the mud to get the lotus. You have to get the wheat and the chaff. Every rose has its thorn. Shout out to Poison. There's so many, right? Shout out to my 80s babies. But there's so many different things that represent that. There's a reason why in poetry and in song we hear that so often. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts too. And thank you for the comment about fail as well. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV, Wednesdays, 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. If you wanted to do any sponsorship of this show or the newsletter, and I'm available on multiple platforms, be sure to check out the link below. I do a lot of my sponsorship through passionfruit.com. It's spelled F-R-O-O-T. They're a great partner. All the links are below. Or you can reach out to me directly, and we'll see what's up. But I love partnering with folks that really want to connect with non-traditional entrepreneurs, side hustlers, solopreneurs, and people who, particularly in this day and age, want to make an impact on the world. And like I said, it's always time to make an impact in the world. To quote Seth Godin, what to do when it's your turn, and it's always your turn. You can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection. It's available now. It's book 27, and there's 7 books in this one, including some compilations. I think you guys would appreciate it. Thank you for the love and support. If you want to listen to the audiobook, you can get it on your favorite platform, as well as listening to it here at BringYourWorth.tv and fresh and new on Spotify. There's some limited episodes on there. I think we're going to focus on the live episodes. So if you prefer Spotify, head on over there. Check it out. Add me to your Spotify playlist. And also, almost all, maybe all at this point, of my audiobooks are also available on Spotify. So thank you, Spotify, for the partnership. What is the worst outcome? Excuse me. What is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at the moment? What is the worst outcome of you doing the best that you can with this moment, with what you have at this moment? Such an important part of our discussion, because whatever you're doing, you're going to have limited resources, period. You could have all the time in the world, but maybe your money's low. You can have a whole bunch of money, but maybe you don't have the physical energy to do it. I talk about this in Build From Now about the 4 or so different aspects. If you go to buildfromnowquiz.com, you can actually take a quiz to learn more about your aspects. All the links are below. I talk about this in my book that came out in 2021, which is actually included in this series as well. It's the green book that you see on the side. So you're going to be lacking something. I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a scarcity way. I mean that in just, we're here on Earth. And so there's going to be limited things of whatever, right? And Built From Now, I give the example of you being a retired person who might have all the time in the world, right? But you might not have the financial resources depending on your situation. You might not have the energy because you're retired, so you're in a different place, et cetera, et cetera. Compare that to someone who is college age. And so they could have all the energy in the world to do all-nighters, if they're healthy otherwise. But they might be broke as a joke. And they might not have the attention span and the focus that, say, a retiree would have. A really simple example of that, that's one way that we can work on understanding where we are in the world right now, as far as our world, what season we're in, and what we're capable of doing. And if we understand what we're capable of doing at this point, then our standard isn't based on some abstract, with everything otherwise perfect, da da da. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. There's never a vacuum. I've done 27 books, 4 TED Talks, 2 startups, and a partridge in a pear tree. In all those situations, it was never perfect, ever, ever. There was always elements that were missing. There was always timelines that didn't line up. There was always stuff that I look back and I'm like, oh wow, I would have did that, and then we're gonna have triple the value. Like, I shouldn't have signed that contract. What was I thinking? Well, I was doing the best that I can with what I got. If we're able to have an honest look at the resources we have, whether we're looking at our past failures, which we talked about earlier in the episode, or we're looking to the situation we're in now, what resources do you actually have? As I always say, I'm proudest of those moments where I showed up, did my best, regardless of the outcome, did my best, and understood I had one hand tied behind my back. Because often we have a finger, a hand, an arm, arm and a leg. We're not working at full capacity because that's not how life works. There are not, I've never found in all my adventures these perfect moments where everything lines up perfectly. I and the people I co-found with or whatever have everything we need and it goes smooth. Like I, I've never experienced that. Jump in the comments if you've experienced that. Like I would love to hear it, but I've never experienced that. And so once you kind of set up those realistic things as far as what your resources are, then you can set realistic expectations. Again, what is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at this moment? Are people going to laugh at you? Are you going to be, have to have the letter A on your chest and people are going to be throwing tomatoes at you through the neighborhood? Are you going to lose all your funding? Are people not going to love you anymore? Is your ego going to get bruised? In coaching, they talk about asking the whys. I've heard it with 3 whys. I've heard it with 5 whys. But let's just say 3 whys. I'm not going to do this because it's not ready. Well, why isn't it ready? Well, it's not ready because there's all these features that I promised that are not in it yet. So then why is that issue? What's the worst outcome with that? Well, people are going to be expecting all these different features that I promised. Okay, well, why or what will happen if you say those are going to launch later? And that this is your minimal viable product, or this is your prototype, or this is version zero point 0.9 instead of 0.1.0 to get nerdy for a second. And they will roll out eventually. Then suddenly you start to get to the meat of it. And it's like, oh, you feel bad that these features aren't in your particular app or product or service. You have those expectations and you're afraid people are going to call you on it. But what if they do? Does that mean you withhold what you have from people until this idealistic moment where you have the panacea and Shangri-La moment, whatever term you want to use, and then suddenly you're going to bestow it to the heavens? When I was launching my second app, Cuddler, I launched it with 2 other co-founders. Shout out to them. One was the artist, and one was the lead of the whole project. So I was more a COO/CMO because I was doing the marketing as well as the day-to-day operations. We launched really quickly. It was the exact same time that um, my eldest, who's now 11, at that time he was 9 months old, 10 months old. Yes, he's almost 1 around time. I started with this app. We launched it shortly after his first birthday. The app ended up getting acquired right after his second birthday. So within a year, it was a whirlwind. Whirlwind. I talk about that again in the complete Bring Your Worth collection and have that conversation about it. Get an audiobook, links are below. And I wasn't sure if we were ready or if it made sense. The app that we had created, it felt like it was the time to launch it. And I'm pretty good with timing. I was like, it feels like it's the time to launch this app. It was called Cuddler, Connected People for Hugs. And a friend of mine at the time, you know who you are if you're watching. I appreciate you to this day. Up in Silicon Valley said, if you wait until you have everything you need and you wait until it's perfect, then that means it's too late. Straight from Silicon Valley. I was living in Silicon Valley right before I launched the app. She was right. All the apps, all the services, all the products that have revolutionized how we operate today, whether it's Facebook, now known as Meta, Google, now known as Alphabet, Amazon, Twitter, now known as X, but I mean really the old school Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I know some of the inside stories with them. They were all simple and scrappy, and they worked with what they had. But that scrappy version that they launched to the audience was enough to build them up to the next level. But if they're waiting to be perfect, Do yourself a favor. Do an online search on what the first version of Facebook looked like. Check out this channel. Go to bringworth.tv if you're not on there already. Go to the playlist where it's like the full Bring Your Worth episodes. In fact, the link is right below. What am I thinking? Link is right below. Click on that link. Go through the 399 episodes before this one. This is episode 400. Go to episode 1. Compare that to someone doing a video from a cave in a very dark place. You won't see that much of a difference. But it has to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. When we did Cuddler, the version we launched was missing 3 or 4 key things that we wanted to have in it. Within a week, it was the #1 app in the world. We're in the cover of the Wall Street Journal. If you don't believe me, you can just do an online search. Look for CUDDLR. I cannot make this stuff up. That was version 0.4, 0.6. It was definitely not 1.0, but that was enough to catch the world on fire. If we waited, again, shout out to my friend in Silicon Valley, if we waited until it was perfect, I would not be talking to you right now because it would never launched. And if it did launch, it would have missed that window. You have a limited window of opportunity for whatever you're trying to create. It's okay to have that kind of urgency. That urgency might get you out the door and out of your perfectionism. Something to think about. What is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at the moment? Go through the worst case scenario. Your family stops talking to you. You're the laughing stock of Silicon Valley or of the community or whatever vibe, whatever people you're trying to serve, you're laughing stock for a week. We're in a quick news cycle. It's not like how it was even 10 years ago. Whatever you screw up, whatever you fail at, quote unquote, it's not going to be headlines for long. Trust me. Go through your worst case scenario. And as you keep going through those layers, maybe you can find out why you're really not moving forward. My favorite book on this topic, another doctor. I'm realizing I have almost all doctors here. Dr. Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, one of my favorite books of all time. There's so many gems in this book, but basically talks about why we stop ourselves from growing. Not the world stopping us from growing. You hear all this lip service. Some of it's lip service. Some of it's real, but some of it's lip service about how other people are holding us back. Mm. At what point do we take accountability? At what point do we up-level our game? Yes, there are factors and entities, and I won't turn this into another type of show. There are things that are blocking us, that are preventing us from being as great as we want to be. Absolutely. So does that mean we just sit down? What I love about the Big Leap is that it's all about the internal struggle. He doesn't talk about society. He doesn't talk about structures. He doesn't talk about who's in government. He doesn't talk about what. Nope. It's like, what are you doing about it? Sometimes we need to hear that. Yes, I have my share of political activism and I have my share of making movements and I've donated how I've donated and all those things. Don't sleep on that. I'm not trying to say that the world is perfect. What I'm trying to say though is that at the end of the day, it's about our accountability. My responsibility is to show up for you on Wednesdays. Doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter how much money I have or don't have, doesn't matter what client came through or what didn't come through, doesn't matter what book is out. I made a commitment to you. As Seth Godin said recently, talking about his book, his recent book about strategy. This is strategy. He recently said, a brand isn't a logo, it's a promise. A brand isn't a logo, it's a promise. The Bring Your Worth brand is a promise saying, okay, I showed up for y'all 400 times in 4 years. That's part of my promise. Me just looking in the camera, talking to y'all, connecting with y'all. That's the vibes here. Dr. Hendricks gets into this in so many different ways. In the future, I could do a whole episode about Dr. Hendricks. Fantastic. Particularly this book is fantastic. It matters to this episode about perfectionism because he talks about something that changed my perspective. It's called an upper limit problem. It's when you have the opportunity to level up, you have a promotion that you can go for, you have an idea that's going to serve this particular community, you just need to launch this product or service. Someone's asking you to speak somewhere, and suddenly you have a chance to be on stage and connect with people, even though you're not a professional speaker. And then suddenly you get laryngitis, or suddenly you randomly trip on something and you break your leg and you can't show up for it. Or you say, you know what, I know you're offering me this position, but I'm not ready for it. All these instances, aside from perhaps some bad luck, we all have bad luck sometimes, these will be considered upper limit problems, where they compare it to like a thermostat, where we have an internal thermostat. See, used the old school thermostat. You can tell. You can tell what era I grew up in. Not the buttons, not the Nest. No, you turn that son of a gun. It's like having a thermostat, and it's saying it's going to be 68 in this house. The weather could be up, the weather could be down. We're going to make sure it's level. Your 68 degrees might be, I always have to live paycheck to paycheck. That's how my family was. That's how my friends are. That's how I am. There's not enough money in the world. What does that mean? When you get a nice, say, six-figure job, before you know it, you're blowing through that money because your thermostat is saying, no, we're supposed to be at 68, son. Come on, fam. We're supposed to be at 68. I don't care how much money you make. This is a comfort zone. Your thermometer, or thermostat, not thermometer, thermostat is set to here. It's supposed to be 68 degrees. So you could be a millionaire. You're still going to be living paycheck to paycheck. Let's make sure that that happens because this is your comfort zone. That's the upper limit problem. As soon as he said that, which of course I put some South Jersey spice on it, but that's what he said. As soon as he said that, it blew my mind. I have the audiobook. I listen to it regularly. And woo, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm seeing all the upper limit problems that I have. Until you see that though, and you don't understand your assumptions underneath, you don't know. You don't know. So it's bringing those subconscious things to the surface. That's just one chapter in this amazing book. I just scratched the surface. Please grab the book if you haven't already. And it is definitely a vibe, you know? Thank you. I'm glad it resonated with you, you know? Whew. Speaking of, stop self-sabotaging. Talk about a nice segue. Live Q&A. It was like the beginning of the summer. I think it was May of this year here in Vegas. Yeah. How much stuff are you doing that's actually preventing you from being your greatest self? Your higher stuff is there. Your higher self is there. You want it to win, right? You want to be your best self. Listen, there's like 5 more weeks as of this recording, as you're watching me, as we're talking. There's 5 more weeks in the year. What do you want the next year to look like? I got some stuff written down on the wall over here that you can't see, but it's right over here. Making strategies and plans. Mm. I'm planning on having a good year, at least within the capacity of how I can make it a good year. It'll be the best year possible based on how I'm showing up. If you're ready to have that conversation, definitely check out that live show. So, what is the worst outcome of you doing the best with what you have at the moment? Throw it in the comments. Are you afraid that people are going to laugh at you? Are you afraid that you're going to lose this opportunity? You're going to screw it up? Are you afraid you're not ready? And then you ask yourself why 2 to 3 more times. See where it leads you. Drop something in the comments if you want to explore it with us. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown. I'm here as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. That is me. I'm here to help you in that way. As a business coach, I've coached probably 500 or 600 of y'all. Come through if you want to coach with me. Just go to damonbrown.net or drop me a line over here. Bring It Worth TV, Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. You can also check me out over on Spotify. You can start to see new episodes over there. Go ahead and subscribe over there if you're rocking with Spotify. And of course, my newest book, the complete Bring Your Worth collection, available everywhere fine books are sold, including at davidbrown.net. If you want it signed, you can also listen to the audiobook for free right here. And you also check out the audiobooks on Spotify, which again are where some of the newest episodes are. Thanks so much for coming through. I'd love to hear your stuff in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling, what you got from this episode, what you want me to explore next, and how you're going to tackle your perfectionism. Until next time, remember you can always bring your worth. You can always build from now. Take care of yourselves and others.